Now, back to the party. So it's kind of interesting. It's an interesting irony. Whereas Washington thought this attack of these 50 men had blown his cover, in fact, it actually contributed to his cover. So there you go. Never know how things are going to work out.
The luck just never stops with George Washington.
Yeah, he really is lucky. So the Army finally reaches Trenton about 8 a.m. And as Washington had hoped and prayed, the Hessians were completely surprised. They were asleep, most of them. Very few were on guard, and they frantically tried to form lines. They hollered and screamed and banged on things and tried to get people out of bed, get them lined up, get their muskets in their hands and loaded, try to get some cannon out. But the American cannons were already pouring devastating fire into the Hessians. And I should mention here, I love to drop names, so why not? Let's drop a name here. Part of the American artillery was commanded by a young captain named Alexander Hamilton.
Yeah,
His
another
name
cameo.
is Alexander Hamilton. I won't sing the whole song, sorry. But so here's Hamilton shining, not for the first time, but significantly shining, and he's going to really capture Washington's attention. So he bravely served as an artillery captain here and really rained devastating fire down on these poor Hessians that were just trying to get out of bed and get lined up. American musket fire also decimated the Hessians. Finally, you had a charge, and there was hand-to-hand fighting. Within an hour, the Hessians surrendered. It was over. Very short battle. The Americans had suffered only 2 deaths. And by the way, these deaths were not from the battle. They were from exposure. There were 2 men that literally froze to death on the way to Trenton. So you could say in the actual battle, no Americans were killed, and only 5 were wounded. And one of these wounded was a young lieutenant, a man that we've already briefly mentioned, a man named James Monroe. Monroe's going to have a big future, but I think, if I remember correctly, this wound is going to more or less knock him out of the rest of the war. But he'll be back, and he's going to do a lot of things, but that's in another series, right, Scott?
Yeah, we'll think up something.
Long after the Revolution.
If you want to know his fighting prowess, you can listen to Presidential Fight Club and see how he fares there.
Yeah, pretty tough customer. Not the toughest we've ever had, but certainly no wimp. He took a bullet for the team right here. All right. On the Hessian side, you had 22 killed, including Colonel Rawl, 83 wounded, and between 8 to 900 surrendered and became prisoners. So that's a huge blow. If you have people surrender and you take them prisoner, you might as well have killed them because they're out. And at least 500 or so escaped. By the way, those 500 that escaped, remember how we talked about Hessians deserting, listener? Well, I bet you quite a few of those probably never reported back for duty. I can't prove that, but I mean, why would you when you could maybe go get a job on a farm somewhere, especially if you spoke English? But so it's a devastating blow. It's a huge win for the Americans. As I mentioned before, 0 killed in the battle, only 2 killed on the march on the way up there, 5 wounded compared to 22 Hessians killed, 83 wounded, and 800 to 900. Most of the army was captured or killed or wounded. Only a few escaped. And like I said, most of those are probably not going to be back. So the Americans' morale is greatly boosted by this. It's not like this is some huge major battle. This is not like the Battle of Gettysburg or even Bunker Hill, but it's what it does for American morale up and down the colonies, not just among the army, is as much or more as it does militarily to hurt the Hessian and the British cause.
Hey everyone, Scott here. One more brief word from our sponsors. We'll see later how important morale is because although Washington struggles with attrition in his army, the flip side is that the British would sometimes complain that their armies seem to come together out of thin air, where in better times enlistments can seriously spike. So something that is a major morale victory and can be used by propagandists can really have a strong effect, and then success can beget success as more people join. A couple of things on legends surrounding this battle and then what else is happening at the same time. James mentioned earlier that Colonel Rahl, the story is that when he was playing cards, he received a note from a Tory spy that Washington was closing in on Trenton, and then Rahl just stuffed it in his pocket without reading and went back to his round. And it was only found and read by Rahl when his tunic was being removed after he was mortally wounded. So don't know if that's true or not, but great story. What Washington learns after the battle is only after the battle he learns that his units never got into the fight. Cadwalader, in charge of the 3rd Assault Party, he only crossed 600 troops at Bristol, and then he withdrew with the rest of his force when they were unable to follow through. And General Putnam, who was supposed to arrive with reinforcements from Philadelphia, never arrives at all. So Washington only had a fraction of the force that he intended to have at Trenton, even though he had prisoners that required a substantial guard force. At this point, he deems it prudent to withdraw back across the Delaware. So that's where we are now. Anything else before Second Trenton? Anything else you want to mention, James?
No, I think we are ending on a high note, so that's good. Finally, some good news for the Americans.
All right, that's an important lesson, to quit while you're ahead. All right, well, that's all for this episode. We'll see you as things follow up afterwards with the Battle of Second Trenton, and we're going to see what happens at Princeton. See you there. Well, that's all I have for today. There's probably a million other things that could be said, but I think this is a good stopping point. First off, I want to give a shout out to the Spy Masters for the Knowlton's Rangers. Vic Austin, Chris, Rob Matlock, Alan Baker, Beverly Ingle, Jake Harrington, Todd Warren, William Ivey, Joyce Normant, Tyler from Colorado, Josh Reddick, Daniel Lawson, Marlene, Michael, Tim Clark, David Powell, Moondoggy from Ohio, Melissa, Christopher Main, Carl from Norway, and Baron Fraser. I'll explain what that is in a second. If you like the show and want to help it grow, there are 4 easy ways for you to do it. 1, like and subscribe to the show on the podcast player of your choice. This helps spread the word about the show. 2, join our Facebook group. Here we can keep the discussion going about new episodes, and you can talk about what you like and didn't like. And you can find this group if you just search for History Unplugged on Facebook. 3, we have an online store with t-shirts, phone covers, and other accessories featuring awesomely bad history puns that were crowdsourced by you, the audience. And you can find that if you go to public.com and look for History Unplugged, or you just go to historyonthenet.com and look for our store there. 4, and this is really the best way to dive deep with History Unplugged, and that's to become one of the Knowlton's Rangers. If you know your American history, you know the Knowlton's Rangers were an elite spy and reconnaissance group in the American Revolutionary War, but it's also the name of the membership program of History Unplugged. You can join at 3 levels. If you join at the level of Scout, you can hear all the episodes of History Unplugged completely ad-free and get early access to new episodes, at least a week early. If you join at the Intelligence Officer level, you get special bonus episodes, like a 10-part series on the World War II hero Audie Murphy, a multi-part series called Ottoman Lives about different people in the Ottoman Empire, and a series called Rendezvous with Death that looks at biographical profiles of Americans who went to fight in World War I before America entered the war. The last level is Spy Master, where you get all that stuff, but you also get 3 hardcover history books: Forging a President, How the Wild West Created Teddy Roosevelt, Race to the Top of the World, Richard Byrd and the First Flight to the North Pole, and The Last Fighter Pilot, the true story of the final combat mission of World War II. Another bonus is you can choose a history topic for me to focus on for an entire episode that can go up to an hour, and I'll answer whatever question you have for me, and you get a shout out at the end of each episode. If you want to learn how to become a member of the Knowlton's Rangers, go to patreon.com/unplugged. That's patreon.com/unplugged. All right, well, that is all for my spiel. Thanks for listening to the History Unplugged podcast, from ancient Greece to the Cold War and everything else in between. See you next time.